We are back with another retro episode today. I've got my guests waiting in the wings. We are going to Euro 96, the iconic tournament. And we're also going to talk about iconic football commentators from yesteryear too. All this and more on Football and Now episode 82.
Football Then and Now, a fun look at football nostalgia and the modern game intertwined. Join us.
Well, a warm welcome. I'm Stuart Palmer and we are going in on a retro episode, and I've got very good friend, Gareth Davies on the show today. He is also in Welsh Parliament. He's an MS and a shadow sport minister as well. That's his day job, but he's a huge football fan, huge United fan. Great to have you on the show, Gareth.
Cheers, Stuart. Yeah, we're really good to join you. Yes, United fan for more of my sins these days, but you've got to weather the ups and downs and ride the storm. So they're not the best at times, but certainly. Certainly crave for more success anyway, and certainly beating teams like Grimsby like we should have done a few weeks ago. I'm still a bit sore about that, to be honest.
I can imagine. I put the penalties on after our game against Mansfield. I said, Dad, we're going to have to watch this now. But yeah, oh my days, it could have gone on and on and on that.
Oh yeah.
No question. Now, Gareth, I know about what you do myself, but can you just explain to the viewers and listeners what you do at the Senedd, which is Welsh Parliament? You're Conservative as well. Just your day-to-day operations as a councillor.
Yeah, so obviously I'm the member of the Senedd for the Vale of Clwyd constituency, which is sort of Rhyl, Prestatyn, St Asaph, Bodelwyddan, Denbigh, those sort of areas. But I also cover the sports brief in the Senedd as well. I'm the shadow sports minister. I also sit on the culture committee, which covers sport within that title as well. And like you say, Stu, as well, big football fan, have been all my life. Despite United's form, as I say, always been Manchester United fan, and I try to engage constituents sometimes in those ways, whether it's through sort of informal things like sharing things from yesteryear about Sky's old Premier League coverage, or when the season opens and that sort of stuff, just to because most people are football fans at the end of the day, and I think it's my duty, I think, in this role as being a shadow sports minister, is to highlight those things, whether it's Welsh or whether it's further afield. I see that as a bit of a duty, to be honest, and do my job to the max, really.
Absolutely. It's your calling, mate. I'm telling you, you've been amazing at what you do. And I know with local issues, I'm obviously in Conway County, you're around Denbighshire there. I know how, proactive you are, trying to make it better locally for your constituents. You're doing an amazing job. You know how much we love what you do as friends and our friendship group.
No, that's really much appreciated, and yeah, you've sort of described it well. I just try and engage people to the best of my ability, do the best for constituents, and politics can be quite a precarious game. But as long as I know that I've done 100% and done my best, then I can carry on or leave if that's what it would be in the future with my head held high. Because I've got, very little to apologise for, because I've just done my best and tried to represent people's views to the best of my ability. That's all I try to do.
Absolutely. I'm going to come away from the day job, though. I'm going to give you a break from the day job. I know you've got stuff going on later with the job. Always busy. You've selected that you wanted to talk about Euro 96. So we're going to hit Euro 96, the iconic tournament, nearly 30 years ago now. Jeez. Just your memories of that tournament, because we loved it. We were younger, of course. We were impressionable. And Euro 96 as a whole, as a tournament.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was only a kid in 96, and, I was only 8, but goodness me, I remember everything around that tournament because of the hype. And I think what it did was galvanise. It was more than just football. What it did was galvanise, the whole of the nation around, that around that tournament, whether people like football or not. It brought patriotism amongst the general public. It had a good sense feeling. It was at the height of the Britpop era as well. It was a good time to be alive. That was. And even though I was a kid, I remember it so vividly. And I think it was probably a bit more from, even just a kid's perspective, because I was able to see all of those games, when I think England's first game was against Switzerland, and even those ones that might be deemed to be, less sexy, if you like, they were always, they're always crowd pullers, because, you had, the old Wembley in its glory as well, the old Twin Towers, I think everything just came together at that time, and for what it was, because I think you want to cover it as well as some of the old commentators. I think, even that all came together because there wasn't the divergence of, multiple TV channels and all that sort of thing. It was still, good old fashioned BBC and ITV, the 4 channels, unless you had a wad to spend on Sky subscriptions at the time, that was the TV, and those England games were, was scheduled for sort of prime time BBC One or ITV at the time. So everybody sort of was drawn to it. And I think, the culture around that time was just, everything just fell together right, I think. Apart from the Germany game.
By hook or by crook, and you'd probably say over the course of that game, they were the better team.
Yes, they were.
Yeah. Chances, Gascoigne, as we spoke about off camera, at full stretch when the ball came across the goal, of course, and it couldn't get on the end of it. It just wasn't to be, unfortunately. And
no, it wasn't. I think it was before then. I think Darren Anderton went close in extra time as well. I think he hit the post, and then I think it wasn't. Yeah, Kevin Keegan was co-commentating Brian Moore for ITV, I think, and I think Kevin Keegan said, "Oh, if he had size 9s, he would have scored that." So that they were the fine margins, but that it wasn't to be, like you said, and but I think the takeaways, like I mentioned, from the sort of the positives of that tournament seem to outweigh what actually happened on the pitch, because it was England's tournament, but I think it was everyone's tournament because everybody got involved, and the hype around it was just incredible at the time.
Baddiel and Skinner with the Lightning Seeds, of course. Free Lions, iconic song, got re-released for World Cup '98, but the original was the best.
Yeah,
the original was best, and the German team was singing it because Jurgen Klinsmann has said about it.
Yeah,
the German team was singing the song, so. Coming away from the football slightly, it was a football song, of course, sang in Wembley so amazingly, the atmosphere, of course, but that song in itself just took on a life of its own.
Oh, it did. Oh, it's still iconic now, isn't it? Even 30 years later. I mean, like you said, they did the rehash of it in '98, but it wasn't the same. I think what it did, it encapsulated that sort of the hype of that Britpop era. Obviously the Lightning Seeds were part of that with Ian Brodie and all that sort of thing, and it just flowed well at the time, and they complemented each other. It was the perfect scenario, really.
I want to take us back to a game. I think we'll go with the second group game that they had against Scotland. I've got an image to come in, the iconic image that everyone knows, the dentist chair, of course. Paul Gascoigne with one of the greatest goals in tournament history, in English football history. Just the skill. And, he was in the press for the wrong reasons prior to the tournament when they'd been away training, doing things they probably shouldn't have been doing, but they were photographed in the mainstream press. There was a big song and dance about it, of course. But this was the perfect tonic when Gascoigne scored that iconic goal, Gaz.
Yeah, I think, like you say, there was a few stories going on. I think there was, questions around the drinking culture within the England team, and those photos. And I think it was Hong Kong they were, wasn't it?
Yes.
And they were, you could tell by the photos they're absolutely leathered, weren't they? But I think what he did, because of the scrutiny and the press at the time, I think what they were able to do was sort of distinguished themselves from that with the skill that they showed on the pitch. And the goal that sort of led up to that was a perfect example of that, I think, because I've tried to replicate it a couple of times just on the pitch, but I can't do it without a bounce. I've got to let it bounce before then hitting it. But obviously Gazza did it without the bounce. And yes, it was incredible. I think it summed up, the amount of skill that he had, and what a player he was, despite his personal issues. He was a quality player.
Colin Hendry was a fantastic defender. We saw him at Blackburn for years, and the way he just took it past him. Yeah. He was a tough, old school centre back.
Oh yeah, Colin Hendry was no mug,
just
was
the
he?
Way, the ability of Gascoigne, it's just unparalleled what he was able to do, and it was the twos up. It really was the twos up to the press.
It was. Yeah. And I think probably at that time as well, because, media was sort of, still limited to sort of print press at the time, and, sort of TV and, the three channels, like we said, for example, that, what was the line in the paper was often the public perception without seeing any, anything to the contrary of that. So that was the only way in those days that you could actually, dispel those myths or whatever around those stories and go, well, actually, despite we might have overdone it one night when we're on tour in Hong Kong, but this is why we are England players, because we're the best that this country has to offer, and they showed it on the pitch.
Amazing, just amazing. It was. I'm with you on. I think it was the best Euros tournament as well. I think.
Oh, without
2000 was good. Don't get me wrong, but I just think the whole way it encapsulated.
I liked 2004 as well. That was a good one. Obviously with Greece winning it, but I think that England team of 2004, it's often that one that sort of people say, oh, how did that team not win anything when they had like Ashley Cole, wasn't it, and a left back, and Scholes, Gerrard, Lampard in midfield, and Beckham. It's like, well, how could you not win anything with that? But it tournaments don't often work like that. It often goes off, the look of the day. Sometimes it's a knockout tournament, and teams play to that, and it's a bit like a cup draw, isn't it? Is that, when you play against a team on a one-off occasion, you can sort of, you can beat form in a way, can't you?
Absolutely. Another iconic game from the group stage. It took on the Netherlands, it took on Holland, of course. Holland had a fantastic team. I could list all the players. They were amazing. I think beforehand, they knew how tough that game was going to be. I had this game on VHS. I went to WH Smith's, and I think it was like $1.99. I went and got it maybe like a year later, and I saw it, and it was heavily discounted. But they hammered the Netherlands 4-1.
Oh, they battered them,
Just memories of that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I mean, I don't. To be honest, I don't remember it at the time. Because obviously the Germany game I remember, but I think that one I don't recall it at the time. But I certainly, seen it, in times, since then. But yeah, like you say, that Netherlands team, they weren't a pushover because Kluivert was still the top striker in Europe at the time. You had Overmars and Van der Sar in goal, and maybe like you say that England knew that there was they were facing a top team, and maybe overcompensated, obviously to their to their benefit, but maybe that's why they performed so well. But I always remember that, was it the last goal, I think, when Shearer scored? I think they commentated on Sheringham's sort of his resilience and his reserve to hold the ball back, because he when you look at the clip, obviously his instinct would be to shoot, but he left it and set up Shearer to strike it home. So it showed that it was unselfish. They were a solid team, and even when they were 3-1 up, I think, or whatever it was, they were still willing to play as a team and not be selfish and just go for the credits or whatever.
Just one of my favourite games of all time for England. It really, really was. It was just so good. Dennis Bergkamp, with so many players. Seedorf.
Jari Litmanen as well. Most of that Ajax team that won the Champions League in '95 were in that Holland team. Edgar Davids and all those sort of players. They were a quality team, and England blew them away that
Michael
night.
Reisiger, Winston
Reisiger,
the Ball brothers as well. It was just a litany of talent at that time. And going back to Sheringham and Shearer, that link-up, I like old school 4-4-2, and I still think it can be played today. I truly believe it. Now it's like you have the single striker, or your players are free, and you're getting goals within the free in the wide areas. I appreciate that the game has changed, but I think in some respects you can go into a 4-4-2 in games, even in the Premier League. I truly believe that, and they typified it, Gaz. Shearer and Sheringham in that game.
And we're similar age, and when growing up and everything, what you were taught was to, if you're running along the wing, you get to the byline, cross the ball in, and hope that the striker can finish it off. But obviously the game's changed. I know that. I know a lot of people. They blame Pep Guardiola for changing, the tactics too much in Premier League games. But I think that's just the way it is these days. Obviously, I think there's, managers are certainly getting younger than what they were, in times gone by. They're more dynamic. They look for, differences in the game. It's a bit more like a game of chess now, isn't it? Rather than, going full out and, giving your all, and it's less of a physical game now, I think, because of that, and probably because of technology as well. But it's not necessarily a bad thing. But I think as well that times change. But I think like you say, I think the default is to always go 4-4-2 sometimes, because it lends itself to doing those things like say going to the byline, getting that ball in, and trusting your strikers to finish it off.
We should have done it on the weekend against Villa. We really should have done. That's a separate thing for a separate day. But I would have gone 2 up top just to get that goal, because we were all over him first half. We actually dominated the game. But that's a story for another day. Iconic commentators. Now, me and you've spoken over the years when we've been out on the old pop, and we've spoken about commentators at length over the years. We're going to go with someone who's probably, I think he's undervalued, underappreciated before we hit the more popularized 2 commentators. And it's a man that we lost many, many years ago as well. So many, many years ago. And the name eludes me. The name is eluding me as we are live. You're going to have to jog my memory.
Brian Moore.
I was thinking of the ex-England rugby player. For the rugby.
Not that Brian Moore. No.
How did I forget Brian Moore? Because we've spoken about him, and I've got a photo of said gentleman. And I do believe, as well known as he was, and all the years with ITV, just your thoughts on him as a commentator and what he brought to the table.
I mean, obviously, because of age, I only remember the latter days of Brian Moore, obviously through, Euro 96 and, France 98 mainly. But then, some of the old Champions League nights as well, I recall some of them that, because, United seemed to play Juventus a lot during those times. And they were always quite a spectacle because, Juventus, I think, they just signed Zidane, I think, but they had they got a lot of players from that Ajax team we were talking about who won in '95, like Davids, and then including that was Deschamps and all those sort of players. But then, it was a bit of a clash of the Titans when United play Juventus. So all of that together, I only saw the latter sort of days of him. But then I always thought, even as a kid, I used to think to myself, gosh, this guy sounds grand. He almost sort of, just the way he spoke and his turn of like tone and phrase, and just the little sort of quips and, little comments he used to say, you were just like, those sort of things you couldn't buy really. They were, he always seemed to be like a gentleman, if you like. He would never, criticize a team too much or be unfair in criticizing them. He'd always be quite sort of, respectful of teams and who teams were playing and things. He always, and I always remember like, or even watch back sometimes, like the montage of when he did pass away, and you're looking at some of those old clips, and you're like, wow. And when Michael Owen scored that goal against Argentina in France 98, I even though that was his last tournament, that commentary of Owen scoring that goal was, I think that was, genius commentary to follow that, the speed of that sprint and how he sort of went past quality players like Ayala and Rower, I think it was, in goal. But those quality players, he was still able to, even at retirement age, he was still, his commentary of that was perfect. Really, he was a class act. Certainly,
it's when the goal would go in, and they don't get excitable, do they? But there was like more like a raised tone to it because he was so his cadence and the way he did it and he went about it was amazing. But
yeah, I mean, in his commentary, it was almost like he knew he was going to score, but obviously he probably didn't know he was going to score. But then, he probably had all that experience to know, like, well, he's onto one here, sort of thing. Like, this is looking promising, sort of thing. So yeah, it's just a class act, I think. And I don't know when I don't like to compare people from yesteryear to nowadays, but I'm probably a lot of media and increased sort of internet and podcasts like we're doing now. A lot of people do have those opportunities, but I think he was a different breed, I think, and just a natural at it. He sort of molded himself over those years because when he was starting, he was probably in the 50s and 60s where they were all still talking like that, and he's going down the wing and that sort of thing. But then how he morphed into the modern game as well was great, and how he brought that sort of experience, and he probably went down an octave or two over the years, but he still managed to do it, which was great. And I think there was I've never heard or seen anybody that hasn't spoke highly of him or or said anything contrary to what the general opinion of him was, because I think it was Keegan in his montage said that you never heard him swear or you never heard him raise his voice or anything. It was just one of those sort of old school gentlemen, who just did the job and did it well, and there was no drama or messing around. It was just he was what he was.
It really was an exclusive club, as you say now, the way it is. And it's not a knock, times change and all that. But yeah, people are put to the fore a bit more now through social media and things like that. There was really an exclusivity to it. With modern commentary, I think I tend to find that the radio commentators do the job best, just because they're having to depict the visuals. You're only hearing audio. So there's a lot of radio commentators I think do fantastic work. They really, really do. I just want to move us along to another man who's now in his late 80s, the great Barry Davies, who's a mainstay.
Barry Davies. He's no relation, Stu. He's not my granddad or my dad or anything.
Just your memories of him.
Yeah. Great guy. I mean, he was one of them, iconic football commentator. And I think, it was unfortunate, I think, for him that, he was against the likes of sort of John Motson at the time, and it was competitive, and, looking at the sort of, documentaries about those times with that, it was what the biggest, one of the biggest sort of things that was revealed on the day of the, the cup final or, a big World Cup match was who the commentator was. Was it going to be John Motson or would it be Barry Davies? And it was an air of suspense, and, like Des Lynam or whatever wouldn't announce it until he went over to them, because he'd say, now I hand over to the commentators, Trevor Brooking, and then there was a pause, John Motson or Barry Davies, so that, given obviously, where it wasn't as technical, there wasn't as much technology around back then. You could sort of get away with doing those things, and it would add to the suspense of the game. But he was a class act. I mean, one thing that always sticks out is when that commentary when Gascoigne scores that free kick against Arsenal, and then the camera pans to Terry Venables at the on the sidelines, and you couldn't, you couldn't even script it. And it goes to Terry Venables and sort of smiling and laughing, and he goes, "Oh, and I bet even he can't believe it." Just it wouldn't be a BBC thing to do, really, because he was just in the euphoria of that moment, and everybody celebrating and just commentating on what he's seeing on the screen. Basically,
he covered other sport as well. He did the ice skating at the Olympics,
yeah,
and that's not. That's not a
Wimbledon,
knock on Motson, who we're going to get onto on the back end here. But he could go into other sport and commentate where specifically, a commentator does one sport and that's that across the board. There's not many that don't do that. I know the rugby.
Oh, I used to do like the synchronized swimming and all that.
The rugby, the guy who does the rugby now, the name, I can't remember his name. You'll remember.
Oh,
he's able to do that as well, go into other sport, which is that's a feather in the cap, that Gaz.
Oh yeah. I mean that's the pinnacle, isn't it? Is being able to sort of do multiple sports, but the amount of research that must be huge to get au fait with the players and what their form's been, what the tricks are, what scores points, what doesn't, what the rules of the game are. It must be huge, but and the time it must take to before they even go on the microphone or the camera to even clue themselves up. It shows the class that sets them apart. And I think I'm all for ambition and aspiration, but I think it should be highlighted, I think, in some cases, just how good some of these people are, and they don't get to sort of commentate for the BBC or whatever by accident. They are the creme de la creme, and that's a good thing. And it's a standard for people to aspire to do or train to be, or even come close to that. But I think it's a nice sort of refreshing reality that those people who are commentating on our game are the very best in the business. And I don't know what the due diligence is to make sure of that, but whatever they do, they seem to do it well and
absolutely.
Do it right.
And to close out, we lost Motty a couple of years ago now. John Motson. We did a homage when I was doing my MMA and boxing podcast. We did an opening for him when he passed. One of the most iconic, if not the icon of British sports commentating, football, of course, around the game for so long, John Motson.
No, he was a great commentator. I think he was more of a fountain of knowledge as well, because I used to watch him on Football Focus, when he was, just a pundit in the studio, and he'd always have, facts or, little sort of stats that, you perhaps wouldn't know about. And he would just, bring it out from nowhere. Say it was Everton, they'd say, and they were playing a certain team, he'd say, well, they've beaten them, in the last sort of 4 games, and they've scored 3 goals every time. It'd take ages to look into that, but he was always that sort of fountain of knowledge. And I think, he chiefed that, that commentary right up until, I think his last tournament was Euro 2008, I think. So he'd gone, right from the 70s to 2008, which was pretty impressive. And I was, I think the great memory was when he was trying to commentate, because I know a lot of people sort of comment and say, that he needed about 800 replays to sort of be clear about what actually happened. But when he commentates, when Ronaldinho scored that free kick against England in the 2002 World Cup. And Motson's trying to make sense of it as he's speaking, and it's almost like it's being revealed what he's thinking as it's sort of happening. And he's going, the ball just went over his head, as if to make out that Seaman could have done better, and he probably could have done, but I think he sort of spoke for the nation at that point, as if to go, what the hell has Seaman just done? He's just let this guy score from an indirect free kick. And we're out of the World Cup. This guy's a disgrace, but I mean, it wasn't a disgrace. But when you look back at that Ronaldinho goal, you think I still think so. How could you let that go in? It's just when you had the experience that Seaman had at the time.
Don't forget though, Gaz, he got beat in the Cup Winners' Cup final. Naeem, when that ball went over him, he had issues in that final. When they played, I think it was Zaragoza, Arsenal and Zaragoza, of course. So it happened before with Seaman, 7 years prior.
Yeah, and he was younger then, wasn't he? So it probably, I mean, I know in 2002 he was he was getting on a bit in terms of football age. He was in his late 30s, but but even 7 years before that, they might have exploited a weakness perhaps and gone. I think it was Scolari was Brazil manager at the time, wasn't he? He might have said to his team, try and chip Seaman a couple of times. He might just mess up or something. You don't know. And that's what you got to do as a team. You have to prey on certain players'
Absolutely.
weaknesses, don't you?
One iconic line from him from the 1988 FA Cup final: "The crazy gang, being Wimbledon, have beaten the culture club." And this isn't me with my blue hat on here, but Liverpool got beaten, didn't they? Liverpool were, superb at that time. An iconic line. The crazy gang have beaten the culture club.
The crazy gang have beaten the culture club. Yeah, because obviously that would have been the time of like Boy George and sort of a bit of a scene around the 80s, wasn't it? But to come up with that line was fantastic. Because obviously as a BBC commentator, you've probably got to be quite careful as well about how you say it as well, because if you're sort of labeling somebody as a crazy gang, you've got to have the substance to back that up, haven't you? So in a BBC context, you have to anyway. But I think in history that was perfect. It sort of summed it up, because I think it was quite iconic in many ways, because it was I think it was Princess Diana gave the trophy to Wimbledon as well. So there was a lot of things that were quite iconic about that, because obviously she's not with us anymore, but I think in many ways that was probably quite iconic. It was that sort of May sunshine, and there's a good feeling around, and there's people sort of around who are key figures in that game who aren't with us anymore. So probably from a nostalgic sense, that's really nice.
We've gone down memory lane here. It's been amazing. It's just a fraction of what me and you could talk about with retro football and nostalgia, of course. Before you go, Gareth Davies, MS Shadow Sport Minister, just where the viewers and listeners can find you in terms of social media and your presence with the Conservative Party, of course.
You can follow me at Facebook. It's Gareth Davies, Vale of Clwyd MS, and then it's Gareth Davies MS on Twitter and Instagram. I think I don't do TikTok. I've not got my head around TikTok yet. But in terms of Conservatives, we're obviously embarking on the election next year. We're on a mission to fix Wales. We've got Darren Miller, who's your local MS in Colwyn Bay there. So we've got a big and very good North Wales presence, and we're hoping that we can change things, and do things for the better in Wales. We're 26 years into devolution, and I think we can do better generally as a nation to represent it. And I think, I don't want to be too political or use your channels to be, to go overboard, but I just encourage people to have a think when before they go to the ballot box in May, and just encourage people to have a think about those things, and elect people who can represent you properly. Maybe not always on the political lines, but personally as well. People who are up for the game, up for the fight, and willing to represent people to the best of their ability. And like I said at the top of the show, that's always what I try to do, and it's from a very genuine perspective. I don't try and butter it up to be something it's not. I just try and do it in a sort of authentic and a bit of a different way. And hopefully people like that and engage with it. Obviously, I'm not stupid. I know that you'll never. You can't appeal to everyone, and not everyone will like you. But if more people like me than what people don't like me, then I'll be happy.
Perfect. No, and when we get to the point of going to the polling station and stuff, what I will reiterate is go out and vote. Let's get a high percentage. Yeah. Let's get a high turnout. People waste the vote. They really, really do. It's important.
Obviously, in my position, all I can say to people is that I hope people vote Conservative, but on that principle is that people do vote and they engage with democracy, because I was always brought up to the the opinion that if you don't vote, you can't have a credible opinion on things. You know, if you say, "Oh, my roads haven't been fixed for whatever years, and my bins haven't been collected," well, did you vote at the last election? No, I didn't. Well, how you didn't play your stake in that then? In talking, in sort of talking up, what you believe in the area. The power is in that pen and where you put your cross. It's not with me. It's not with any other politician. It's with the people, and that's where
absolutely
it should be.
Well put. Gareth Davies, I'm calling you by your full name. I've done a little bit of Gaz as well as we've gone through, but officially, Gareth Davies, MS, member of the Senedd, which is our Welsh Parliament down in Cardiff, and Gaz just lives up the road from me, of course, up in Prestatyn. I'm in Colwyn Bay, Colwyn Heights. Thank you so much for coming on Football Then and Now, because I know how busy you are. It's been great. We'll get you back on later on the season, I think, to talk about United in the present, the past, and the future. Further down the track, hopefully there's a bit of form.
I think we need a whole new episode to talk about United, probably.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, mate.
No worries at all. No, pleasure to join you, and thanks for inviting me along. It's always a pleasure to obviously support you in what you're doing, and I'm always happy to share my knowledge and help you any way I can. So I just hope this podcast continues to do well, and it grows, and you get more engagements with people, and what it serves as is justice to the effort and all the work you put into doing it. So keep doing what you're doing, and I'm sure it'll
Thank you very much, mate. It means a lot coming from you. It really does. We will be back next week. I think it's going to be more current, what we're going to go with, because we've gone back into retro, we've gone back into nostalgia, because we had a lot of current stuff going on with the Premier League coming back. That silly international break sandwiched in where it is. It does my head in. But hey ho, that's it. It's UEFA, it's FIFA. They hold the cards. It's money. Story for another day, as I always say, and we'll see you very, very soon for episode 83 of Football Then and Now, a nostalgic look at football, and we also cover current topics too. Take care, everybody.
Football Then and Now, a fun look at football nostalgia and the modern game intertwined. Join us.